Hey everybody, so our goal for today is to wrap up sort of the platformer game here. You'll have to do a couple things first here right at the beginning that I have done. So let me take you through that really quick. I got myself a font, which I use one called Totally Hand. There's a site called 1001freefonts.com. That's a really good one for free things. If you want to look somewhere else, that's fine too. What you want is a .ttf file for true type font. Unzip whatever folder it's in and then just drag that into your assets folder and we'll use that straight up. The other thing I've gone and done is gotten some sound files. So I got myself a sort of a projectile sound effect here, and with that selected here from my assets folder, you can just hit play and have a listen to that. And then it's supposed to be a bow, but it's going to be our little fireball projectile sound. And then I got myself some happy sounding fanfare for when we win. Get the idea there. And then I also got some music, which, sorry, it took me a second to find it. It's here. And this is the music that we're going to have as the background for the scene. So we'll get to that in just a second. So make sure you go and get those things. For sound effects, I use a site called soundbible.com. It's got a lot of really good royalty-free sound effects. That's a good place to start. Whatever else you can find, as long as it's some kind of readable sound file, you can get it into your assets folder. Should be usable by Unity. For music, I recommend finding something that you like on YouTube, actually, and then Googling YouTube to MP3 converter. The first hit that comes up there for me is a pretty good one, and that's a free service without having to sign up for anything, so that's my preference. So our goal for today is to get some sound in here, to get some UI elements so that we have text on the screen, and then to make a build. But one thing you can see here in my assets window is things are getting a little bit cluttered, so we probably should organize this a little bit. So if you right click here in the assets window, you can go create folder, and then this basically works just the same way as Windows Explorer. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I am going to clean it up because that's a good sort of convention to follow. So maybe a folder for scripts, and then a folder for images and animation, and then maybe a folder for sounds. And that covers most of our files here. So you can hold control while you click to select multiple things. So we'll do the images first that we're using here. And technically these ones are prefabs, so I probably should leave those there. Or maybe make a different folder for prefabs. But image, 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 one here, and here. And we can just drag those into here, just like Windows Explorer. That's easy. We can just make another folder for prefabs, because I've actually got quite a few of those at this point. So my prefabs have the gray box around them, so that'd be these guys. And we can just drag those into the prefabs folder. Any scripts, we've got a bunch of those now from before. Select those, drag them in, and then sounds would be, oh, I've missed a prefab here. Sounds. That's an image. We have, this is animation stuff. So this really cleans things up nicely, and everything still functions the same way. I don't need to update anything at all. These are some more sounds. Okay. Maybe one for fonts if I were using multiple fonts, but I'm not right now. So that's definitely improved in terms of how this all looks. Okay. So what we want to do now is get sound in our game. Let's get the functionality stuff first, and then we'll go after the UI stuff, and we'll make a build so that this is all finished. What we want to do here is go into our script on the player. So the player controller script. Remember, this is just always hit reload on that. Doesn't make too much of a difference, just an interfacing thing. We don't need any new libraries for this, but what we do need is an audio source. So audio source, and I'll just call it odd, or audio or odd. Odd's fine. So that's where we're going to play any sounds from. We'll attach this to the player object. Sometimes it's a bad idea to do that. If we were destroying the player, it'd be a pretty bad idea to do that. We'd want a game manager instead, but that's a little more advanced than I want to go for this particular project. So in start, we'll just set up that reference. Odd equals get component, and that, like I said, that's the most important method that we have. And we'll just get the audio source that's on the player. So we need to make sure we add one to the player. So you can go ahead and save that. Let's also make public audio clip variables, and we'll drag those in Unity in just a minute. So we don't actually need a variable for music because we're just going to run that right from the scene. But we do need a variable for shoot sound and one for win sound. That's good enough there. You'll notice that I'm using camel case here. Start with lowercase, and then each additional word gets a new uppercase letter. The advantage of doing it that way is it shows up as full words with spaces in Unity for us. It kind of assumes you're going to use camel case, so you may as well get in that habit. Okay, so I've got some public references there, and let's go back over to Unity, add an audio source, and make sure that we're all set there. So on our player object, we will add component. We'll go audio source, which is under audio, of course, right there. Okay, then it gives us some options here. The only thing we really need to worry about, I mean, they're all pretty straightforward. We have play on awake, so if we give it the audio clip to begin with, then it will play on awake for us. And I'm going to go ahead and do that before well, we have those public things on our script, so I guess we may as well fill those in first, the shoot sound and the win sound. Let's go to our sounds folder here. This is the win sound, and just drag it in there for win sound. This is the shoot sound, just to make sure we don't have any empty references, okay? And then this is my music. Just make that the clip on audio source. Right. And then when you hit play, is that play on awake? There we go. It took a second to get going. Kind of some neat, almost geometry dash sounding stuff. All right. Sorry, I might need to bring those levels down a little bit so you can hear me better. So we'll do that. Okay. Anyway. So that plays music. We can control whether it plays on a loop. We will have it do that in case the player plays our platformer for a long time. It automatically plays on awake because of this checkbox here, so we don't have anything to worry about there. There's nothing we really have to do with that. It is attached to the player, so if the player disappears for some reason, like if we get hit with something, it's going to destroy that too. But as I recall, we just reloaded the scene, so it's going to reload the music there. So we have our music. Oh, can't get me. And then it resets it. Okay? So I have that pause in my music at the beginning, which, oh well, that's in the file that I wanted. That's fine. Okay? So let's go back to our script and control when these sounds actually play from some code. So when we fire something, so I'm here, we want to say, we can play the sound right underneath this. Play the shooting sound. So that's our audio source, which is odd. Dot play one shot, and then it'll be shoot sound. So we save that, and we go back to our game here, hit play, and now we should have sounds on. Now I've got this pretty sort of fun, intense dubstep fire bow launcher experience. My projectiles don't actually do anything at this point, and that's probably fine. We've only got the one enemy here. I kept it simple. Obviously, you just want to have a trigger happen, and when the enemy hits something tagged projectile, you want it to disappear or take damage or whatever else you want it to do. Remember, this is just a super basic platformer, so I'm not going through all that stuff here, but if I get some requests on that, if you guys want to do more cool stuff with your games, then let me know, and maybe I can work it into a later video or something to that effect. Okay, we also want the win sound. So one trick that we can do here, rather than, we've got this score variable. So what we can do here is make a target score variable, and that way, since our pickups are all tagged as pickup, what we can do is find out in our code how many pickups there are, and say if we get all of them, then we have won. So rather than counting them in our game, because maybe we want to add some, maybe we want to subtract some, make our lives easier to say if the player gets all of them, then we can be a winner. So let's say int target score, something like that. Okay, and then we'll say calculate score for winning. That's our target score. So to do that, we'll say list of game objects, pickups is equal to a new list of game objects. Oh wait, take that back. I think it's an array actually, now that I think about it. sorry, game object array pickups. Sorry about that. Equals, and then we can do game object dot find game objects with tag, and then the tag can be pickup. Okay, so that now has an array that contains however many pickups there are in the scene, and then we'll say target score is whatever the length of that is, pickups dot length. And that is a handy shortcut for us, so we don't need to keep changing it for whatever scene we're in or for whatever else we might be doing. Okay, so that's a nice trick there. And then in update, we can say if we score, so we'll just do it when we hit a pickup actually. So if we have 1, play the sound. So if score is greater than or equal to target score, I don't know how it would be greater than or equal to, or greater than, but let's just cover all our bases here. Then we want to go odd dot play 1 shot. That's our sort of sound thing there. The win sound. Okay. Now in our game we have 6 pickups, so I think we should be able to test this pretty easily. Let's not get hit by the rocks that the goblin's throwing at us. Wait for it. There we go. It sounds kind of funny with the music playing, so I wonder if we can just make it stop. We could say on dot stop. And that should stop the music when we do that. That's a good trick. I like the completely ineffective fireballs. It makes a cool sound. There we go. Okay, so that stops what's currently playing, and it plays our win sound, detects when we've won, and all that good stuff. So that's how you can handle basic sounds. Obviously, there's a lot more you could do. You could add an audio source to the enemy, have that fire off a sound when it's shooting something. You could add a sound that when the player gets hurt, that's an option. You could add a jump sound or a landing sound, all sorts of things. You just have to be creative with it, but I just wanted to take you through some of the basics here in this first project. Okay, let's add some user interface stuff then. So in order to make this happen, what we need to understand is that user interface items like normal buttons or text or images on the screen, not sprites like we have here, these are not the same as game objects in our scene. They happen at sort of a totally different level. So under game object, you go to UI for user interface, and let's add text here. And when you do that, it's going to create the canvas and the event system automatically. Don't mess with those things. We need to leave them as they are. So if I double click on the canvas, it actually zooms way out here, and you see you've got the little play area down there. And then this, we have this giant box, and this represents the user's viewable port. Okay? So any text object that we put on here, where is my text? It starts off over there off the viewable port for some reason. I don't know why. But you can just click it and drag it. And we can, we've got a box for font here. So let's go back to that font thing that I told you to get earlier. We'll put that in there. And one thing that I pretty much always do with my text here is to change horizontal overflow and vertical overflow. Maybe I want it to wrap, but I definitely don't want it to truncate vertically. I want it to overflow vertically. Okay. The problem with it truncating vertically is if you go too big for the box itself, it'll just cut off. Okay. I like to have both of them set to overflow so that it goes off there. Okay. And maybe we take a look at how that looks in our screen. And if you put it in game view here on this tab, then you can see that. Now, one really important thing that you must do when dealing with text is this drop down box right here beneath the game tab. If you have it set to free aspect, which it often defaults to, that's going to create you all kinds of headaches when you actually try to build this thing and play it normally, even though you won't see it in the Unity editor. So make sure it's a standalone of some kind. I think 1024 by 768 is a good one to go with. That's a pretty good standard resolution for these games. If you have something else you want to use, fine. Just make sure you use that later when we're checking out the build settings, okay? But get this out of the way now. In every project, make sure before you put any UI elements in that it's a standalone and not a free aspect. I don't even know, like that option is there for editing, but it is not good and creates all sorts of headaches, okay? So let's not have anything other than standalone right here, all right? So let's have this text here, and we'll call it score text. All right, and then maybe we can just have that serve as sort of our winning text too, just for the sake of simplicity. I could have another one, but I don't see much reason to. Okay, so that's a nice font there. I'm all right with that sort of darker sort of color there. I think that works out pretty well. You can see that it stays in the same spot on the screen no matter where I go. I feel so accomplished. That is not there in the world space. It's not on the camera either. It's on the viewport. So no matter what happens with the camera or whatever else, that's going to stay in that spot. That can be changed in different ways, but for the sake of our basic UI elements, that's what you want to be aware of. Okay, so I've got the score text here. Let's go back to our player controller script once again. We're going to need to include a new library here, so we'll go using Unity Engine .ui for text. Okay, and let's make a public text object, capital T text, and we'll call it score text. And that's a reference, since it's public, again, it's a reference we're going to have to make in Unity. We save that. And let's go ahead and drag that in. So we never have an empty box there. So on our player, down to the player controller script, we've got this box for score text. It's expecting a text object, so we can just drag it over, or we can click this little box next to it, this little circle here, and find the one text object that we have, and that's our score text. Okay. And what we want to do in our code here in start, we want to initialize the text. I can spell initialize text. So we'll say score text. And then the weird thing is score text is not a string, it's a text object. It has a string as one of its attributes. The string is called text. So you score text.text, lowercase t text this time, and that's what it actually says. Equals score, and then whatever the score is, which in our case starts at 0. We may want that to change, potentially later, so that's why I'm not just putting 0 here, but whatever. I don't know what ideas you have for your game that you'd want to change it, but who knows. So I copy that line of code, and then let's just have that update down when we score point. So instead of printing it, we don't need this anymore. We don't need the console part. What we want is to update text on screen, which is that. And then if we've won, we can just, if the score is greater than or equal to the target score when we score, in other words, if we get the last thing, we can say score text, where did it go? I lost it for a second. .text plus equal, and we can add an end line to it and then have it say you win. So we'll keep the score there. I'm just adding to the score rather than setting it to you win. We'll just add that to the score if they get everything. And that should do it. So we save all of that. Go back over to, what the heck? Interesting. I've got I should have checked this font a little more closely. That's funny. Score is a variable. Did I not? No, it definitely. Okay. Give me just a second. I guess I have to go get a different font. I guess that one's only for letters. Should have checked that ahead of time. So I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Rookie mistake on my part. I've gone behind the scenes here and gotten a different font, and we're going to use that one instead. The one I had, not great. Always fully check out the font. Okay, let's try that again, because I know the font, I know the code was good. It's just the numbers. The font didn't have numbers in it, which is kind of funny, actually. I guess some fonts just don't. Okay, and then I've got the you win there if I get them all. We have all the score. Now, a rock can still hit us at that point, and then reset us, but that's fine. If you want to do something more complex in there, if you want to have a Boolean variable that sort of sets up whether the player's allowed to move or not, and then whether the goblin's allowed to keep shooting, or if the enemy projectile is allowed to keep moving, there's a whole lot you can do with that that's not especially complicated. The goal here is to get the just sort of basics in place. All right, I could certainly go about making my play area a little more interesting. Maybe add some more enemies there. I'll do that really quickly, and because I have all the basics in place first, and this goes back to prototyping, you want to get everything working simply, and then after everything is done, only then you want to go and change up your sort of world. Okay, so it's easy. That's the beauty of the use of prefabs here. We've got a whole lot of easy ways to get the platform here. I'm sure I'll have to jump over that goblin at some point. And then I can kind of have it go a little higher up here. I got to be careful because I don't have a ton of time for testing, so I want to be conservative in the way that I'm setting this up and make sure I'll be able to actually jump on everything. But I can just drag these into here, and you can see that it makes everything quite simple. And then kind of give the player a platform that they're frustrated that they can't reach at first. And then we can add more pickups. And remember, the background's going to move with the camera, so it doesn't really give them one here. So they have to jump back and all that kind of thing. And because of the way we wrote our code, it's just going to update for however many pickups there are in the scene. So no worries at all there. And we can add another goblin here. The player will have to time their stuff correctly. We can add a goblin here. It's the squad. Although I don't know if the player's going to be able to get around them now that I think about it, so maybe we don't want that one. But we can probably have one here. And just to make it particularly challenging for the player, I guess. There. Okay. Now I have to go try and get them all. Let me just do a quick test of this. We'll see how, if I'm any good at all. Oh boy, there's a lot of these dudes. Just push them to their deaths. Okay, can't even, oh, I did quite get up to that one because I was over the corner of the platform there. Skill run here. This music's kind of intense for this. Playing at full volume in my ears, so I can't even hear myself talk, but that's okay. Okay, we got there. I'm a winner. I have nowhere safe to rest, but I am a winner. I can rest right behind him here. Uh-oh. Okay, well, anyway. Seems like it works fine, so suppose I'm happy with my game. That's good enough for now for a basic platformer, okay? So now at this point, I want to make a build and be finished with this thing, make an executable that can be played on any computer, essentially, or any PC. So what we want to do, first let's save. So Control-S to save. If you haven't up until this point, I haven't talked about it previously, I called my scene main scene. That's fine for now. It gives you an option of what to name your scene when you save the first time here. So one thing I could do before I do this is to kind of clean up this hierarchy here by making empty game objects that serve as folders and making it so there's not so many objects in my scene view here. I'll save that for another time, but it's as simple as making one empty game object and calling it like pickups, for instance, and then selecting all the pickups and dragging them onto that. So we can save that for another time. But for now, let's go File, and we'll go Build Settings to finish this thing off. That's the window that I get. I want to make sure to add open scenes here so that everything I have is part of my build. My build is my executable file that the player is going to be able to actually play outside of Unity. We want to mess with the player settings a little bit here. So let's go Player Settings. That pops up here. We can access that from elsewhere here. Lots of cool options here that you have. Let's give it a product name. We'll call it Super Basic Platformer. And I don't know if you have a different name for yours, but that's fine. And that'll be the name of the thing in the window there. Resolution. This is an important one. Because we made it a standalone, 1024 by 768, I want to enforce the player to make sure that we have that. So when it runs, I want it to run at that resolution, nothing else. That'll make sure my text is in the right spot. Everything looks the way that I saw it here in my game view. So let's disable the resolution dialog. And we'll say standalone default is full screen. No, we don't want default full screen. What we want is 1024 by 768 is my width and height. Okay. And allow full screen switch. We can probably live with that. It's going to maintain that resolution, I believe, so we should be okay on that front. And supported aspect ratios. We'll see what we have. You can also change the icon for this thing. So if you have a picture in mind, I wonder, I think I might have, we can just override that because it's going to keep the default Unity thing in there. So click override and it gives you the option to select whatever you want. So suppose I use, what do I have? I'll use the fireball so that it actually has a meaning. And now, whenever I select the file in my folder, which we'll see in a minute for the executable, that'll be the picture. It lets you set that in here, which is really cool. You can change the splash image. You can mess around with some of those settings too. I'm not going to do it this time around, but you've got access to lots of cool options here. Okay, so you can learn more about those if you like, but I think that's a good setup there. The resolution stuff is definitely the most important. So if we say build, it's going to give us an option of what to build it as. You can't put your executable build in your assets folder. It automatically goes one level up into the projects folder here. So we'll call it super basic platformer build. And sometimes I like to put a version number in here. So we'll say version 1.0. It's an exe. That's the only option I have, just checking. So we'll go save, and then it takes a second, and then builds that thing for us as an executable. All right, and it'll automatically open up the folder for us most of the time. Here it is. If you want to share this build with somebody, what you must have is the executable, obviously, the Unity player file that allows it to run, and then this folder, which is the name of it, plus the word data with an underscore. Give people those three things in a compressed folder, and they can run your game without being able to change it or mess around with it at all. Okay, so let's run this thing and kind of see how it plays. Oops. That's over in the other screen. Sorry, it opened up over there. Oops. And as you can see, even though I gave it the option to allow full screen, it didn't work because of the mandated resolution that I put in there. Get up there. Okay, that's a tricky corner. Oh, that's not great. Okay. Well, anyway, so that's my executable. Now this is something that I could take and share with anybody. And obviously, I could potentially make an executable that's way more complicated than this simple thing that we made here. But it is very satisfying to have something that I can take away from Unity here. And now I have sort of made a game, however simple it is. And there we have it. I can close that freely. And yeah, that's the story. Now we have made the first version of our super basic platformer, and that is enough for today. I think next time what we're going to do is look at sort of expanding this thing outward and making other types of games, but so many of the basic skills that we have, I'd consider coroutines kind of a more intermediate skill, and that's something we're going to have to talk about pretty soon here, but so many of the basic skills were covered in this project. So I hope you found that useful, and I hope that it's been enjoyable for you to make something useful here that you can just go ahead and play from the start. It's a good starting point in your development career. As always, let me know if you need any help or have any issues with any of this, and we'll see you next time.